Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Anna Guida, and I'm the Program Manager of Empower Idaho. And we are just so excited to be here today with Erica McBeth for her awesome presentation, Leadership Through Human Connection, at our Peer Support Connection Conference today. So real quick, it's 1:01. We're going to hang out for 2 more minutes to let folks join us. It is kind of over the lunch break, so we understand if some folks needed to stretch, get some water, use the restroom. So I encourage you to do these things now. And then at about 1:03, I will give a quick kind of overview of the chat functionality or the questions box, and then we'll get started with Erica. So again, thank you all for being here, and we'll get started in about 2 minutes. Okie dokie, well, it is 1:03, so we're just going to get started. Again, hi everyone. If you joined us in the last couple of moments, we're so glad that you're here today joining us for our peer conference, the first one we have here in 2022 with Empower Idaho. My name is Anna Guida. I'm the Program Manager of Empower Idaho. We do education and advocacy for adults living with behavioral health conditions in the state of Idaho. And what that looks like is we put on awesome trainings such as these for professionals in the behavioral health system, as well as people living with behavioral health conditions and their loved ones. So we just love the work that we do, and we love being able to work with awesome folks like Erica McBeth, who is here for her presentation. Erica will get started in 1 moment. I just wanted to briefly go over a few items with the control panel, which you may be hearing for the 3rd or 4th time today. But in case anyone is new joining us today, we wanted to make sure everyone's on the same page. So attendees do not have the option to turn their camera or their microphone on. So we ask that you utilize the questions box, which is in the control panel of GoToWebinar. That little orange arrow will pop in and out. And you can type in any comments or questions you have for Erica, or even tech issue questions, and our team will triage those. Erica's requested that we're going to do an awesome Q&A session at the end of the presentation, which is great. We'll have about 15 minutes to go through any and all your questions. So please pop them in throughout, and we'll get to those at the very end. Again, CEU information has been emailed to you to ensure that you have all the information you need to make sure you qualify for continuing education credits following the session. So we ask that you do complete the survey evaluation that goes out afterwards. That is required for your CEU. Okay, Erica, I'm handing off to you now. We're super excited, and yeah, we'll just be in the background monitoring it if you need anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna, for giving everybody the introduction. And you guys, I'm just really so excited to be here. And today we're going to talk about leadership through human connection, which is very, very near and dear to my heart. And it really started all the way back when I was a sophomore in high school. I was invited to attend a leadership conference, and I happened to be the representative for my school. And I had this great time. It was the first time in my life anyone had ever talked to me about becoming a better leader. And I kind of geeked out on it a little bit. I found that I really liked reflecting on self-improvement and how to make myself a better, more well-rounded person. I met some amazing people while I was there, and overall, it was a really great experience. But I remember sitting in that audience of 15-year-olds and looking around and thinking, who in their right mind nominated me for this? Because I wasn't what today they would call an influencer. I was quiet. I didn't have a lot of friends. I got good grades, and I had expressed some interest in key positions in some extracurricular activities that I was involved in. But I promise you, no one was going to elect me for class president. I wasn't popular, I wasn't well known, and I sure as heck didn't believe anyone was going to listen to me about anything, much less leadership. I felt like someone had probably made a big mistake because I didn't feel like I was like the other kids in the room who I truly believed belonged there. And that's the thing about leadership. It isn't something someone can put upon you or elect you to. You don't automatically become a leader because you happen to be promoted into a position of authority. Leadership is something that begins inside of you. And I walked around for a lot of years wondering how you got that thing inside of you that made other people want to listen and want to follow you. Was it confidence? Was it natural popularity? Or was it something else? So today, I'm going to break true leadership down into two very basic concepts: self-accountability and the ability to develop trust among the people who surround you. Without these two things, you may be put in charge of people, but without them, you will never be a true leader. You will never be someone that people look up to. You might rule your office or your business with an iron fist, but no one will like you. And being disliked, that's a terrible place to live in. It breeds a lot of insecurity and fear and a lot of stress. And by the way, even if you want to believe that you are truly the top dog around town, without self-accountability and the ability to develop trust in people, no matter how far you may rise, you will always know deep inside your gut that you are unworthy. So my goal today is to teach you a different path to leadership, because somewhere along the way, we sort of forgot that leadership isn't just about managing the bottom line and how fast you can make the horses go by whipping them into submission. It's also about taking care of people, your people. And the only place you can find that sort of change is by changing yourself from the inside out, which I know that sounds really horrible, but it's actually the easiest thing that you can do. And I'm talking from a place of experience, because you see, 8 years ago, that girl on the screen, that was me. And if you would have told me at that time that I had leadership qualities, I would have laughed at you. Yet, I was a mid-level manager in a pretty sizable company. And I had gotten there, well, I think mainly because people liked me. I think the other members of the management team found me to be competent and easy to work with, but I didn't feel like a leader inside. I gave direction and I passed along information from corporate, but I wasn't creative. I didn't think outside of the box, and I just did what I was told to do. And you know, looking back on it, maybe that's all they wanted from me, but I would have been a much more effective leader if I had been listening to the people who are actually doing the work. If I had been more engaged, I would have enjoyed my work more, and my team would have enjoyed their work more. And when people are enjoying their work and feeling empowered, a synergy starts to occur where all of a sudden the company's bottom line starts to grow, and then everyone celebrates without really fundamentally knowing what it was that really got them there. And I'll tell you what it is. It's harnessing the power of human connection. The way I found the leader inside of myself didn't start because I was reading a book, or it didn't start in the workplace. It started because I made one simple key decision. In late 2017, I decided I was going to meet and have a conversation with one person I didn't know every week for a full year. Now, this was a personal project. It stemmed from my desire to bring more people into my life personally. It was never meant to bleed over into my work life. But have you guys ever noticed how, whether you like it or not, your personal life always seems to affect your work life in some way? I know we're all told that the professional thing to do is to leave your personal life at home when you walk through the office door, but it doesn't really work that way. I mean, that's kind of just part of being human. Now, when I set that big goal of meeting one new person a week for a full year, I'm going to be honest with you. It made me really nervous. It made me nervous because the first thing I did was to do the math on it. And the thought of meeting 52 people that I didn't know, it was overwhelming. That alone could have stopped me right there in my tracks. And that's just the truth. Even meeting just one new person requires you to walk into the unknown. And let's face it, that's a really scary concept. And here's the thing, because it wasn't a work project, there was no one holding my feet to the fire to do this. The only thing that pushed me forward was a deep-seated desire to help other people. Because in December 2017, I found myself at a walk to prevent suicide. And when I got there, I was shocked that there were 2,000 people in attendance. It was at that walk that it occurred to me that everyone there had lost someone because they had likely felt sad and lonely and depressed. Kind of like how I had felt throughout much of 2017, and really throughout a big portion of my life. You see, I always just thought it was just me, that there was something fundamentally wrong with me on why I always felt lonely. It never occurred to me that we have been living in a loneliness epidemic for years because no one is talking about it. And by the way, this was happening long before 2020. You can Google it. New studies even suggest that as many as a third of all Americans feel either lonely either frequently, almost all the time, or all the time. Those studies even go on to report that 61% of young people aged 18 to 25 and 51% of mothers with young children are suffering from extreme loneliness. So if you think that this loneliness epidemic isn't affecting your company, you're wrong. If you work with even 3 or more people, chances are someone you are working with side by side with right now is suffering from deep loneliness, maybe even depression, and you probably don't even know it. Or you may be sitting there and thinking right now that I might actually be talking about you. I once did this radio interview talking about depression and suicide prevention, and it just so happened that the person interviewing me was an old coworker. I told him that the last serious episode that I'd had with depression was when he and I were working together. And I looked him right in the face and I said, "Did you know when we worked together that I had a serious bout of depression?" And his face fell because he had no idea. So that was the underlying reason why I went on a mission to meet one new person I didn't know every week for a year. It was because it hurt me to think that other people were hurting like I hurt. And I really just wanted to do something about it. No one asked me to do it. No one gave me a title. It started like a fire inside of me that grew until it drove me into action. And do you know what that is? It's called the first flames of leadership. And a lot of us have these ideas on how we want the world to be, and then we doubt ourselves and the flames die out. We never think that maybe that flicker of fire was supposed to be there to move us into greatness. But then we see all of our flaws and we think, maybe someone else would be better at this than me. But at that time in late 2017, I looked around and I thought, nobody else is going to do this. If I want this to happen, it has to be me. And that's where leadership starts. It starts in the moments of self-doubt where we propel ourselves forward anyway, knowing that there is a real possibility that you might fail. And in those early planning moments of 2017, I began to wonder how I was going to meet 52 people that I didn't know. And as I took the project on, I really believed that eventually I was going to be relegated to wandering through coffee shops on the weekends, begging people to talk to me. Now, how awful does that sound? And even though I knew that that might be what I had to do, I moved forward anyway, because I might not have been accountable to anyone else, but I was accountable to myself. Now, for the record, I never ended up wandering through coffee shops because for me, that was a really scary concept. And I gave myself a break because I had an idea of something that I thought might be a little bit easier. So I went to social media and I announced that I was going to be doing this thing where I sat down and talked to people I didn't know. And I asked those people who knew me if they might know someone that I didn't know that might be willing to sit down and have a conversation with me. And I was shocked at how many people responded. People came out of the woodwork to pass along names to me, which really kind of got me started on the whole project. And even though I didn't know it at that time, that thing right there, declaring to the world my intention, that was important. See, we all have private moments when we doubt ourselves to the point where we stop moving forward. But when you feel like you have other people depending on you, you are much more likely to do the things you're afraid of. Too many of us have goals that are stuck up on a vision board somewhere that we've never even told anyone about. And if you want to accomplish something, you have to tell people. I mean, that's the magic. That's the thing that unconsciously energizes the goal into action. Even if you have to say it in a really shaky voice because you're terrified that you're going to fail, you still have to say it. And the second I started telling people my intention of bringing new people into my life was the second it started happening. But the thing that really gave the project legs was that I had not just declared that I wanted to meet new people. It was also the fact that I set up the regular time frame of sitting down with one new person a week. Because you see, how you set up your goals as a leader is just as important as having them. Here's why the time frame of that goal worked so well. Initially, I got a handful of names of people that all I needed to do was contact them and get something set up. But after I had run through those names, it was really easy for me to see when I needed to put forth a little more effort and to start to get creative about meeting other new people. It was the regularity of that time frame that became habit forming. But it also gave me a measurement tool so I could see my progress. And when I started to take notice that I was getting close to weeks where I didn't have anyone new to talk to, I started looking for ways to strike up conversations with people that I didn't really know, but who knew me maybe just a little, like my neighbors or with people on social media. And because I started the project pretty easily, it then gave me the confidence to be able to walk up to these new people and say, hey, I'm doing this project where I'm meeting and sitting down to have a conversation with one new person a week. You seem like you're pretty interesting. I was wondering if you'd let me buy you a cup of coffee sometime. And when I asked the question, most people said yes. And I think it was because I didn't have any hidden agenda. I told them clearly and directly exactly what I was looking for. And that was just to get to know them a little bit. I think when you have ulterior motives, people can subconsciously feel that. And if I'd had those motives, I might not have gotten as many yeses. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, wow, all of this sounds pretty horrible. Why would anyone want to get to know more people? I bring it up because I often hear people say things like, oh, I hate people. They are the worst. And every time I hear someone say that, I cringe a little inside because I know that what they are really saying is that they have been damaged by other people in some way. Because let's face it, we all have things in our lives that happen that are unsavory. It could be past abuse, both physical or emotional. It could be hurts over things that others have done to us, either intentionally or unintentionally. It could be negative thoughts that we carry in our brains that we just can't seem to shake, that seem to poison our moods, our abilities, and our confidence. Or sometimes we just get so focused on that all-consuming to-do list that is a million miles long in this world that moves so quickly. And then people just keep stepping in and getting in our way. I'm talking to you moms. Whether we realize it or not, all of these things are truly just the fight or flight response. When we feel threatened by any of these things, we either retreat into ourselves or we come out swinging. And in a world full of people who are hurting, those hurts just keep crashing into one another. That's why so many people say they hate people. I don't think it's because they really hate them. It's because they walked around feeling emotionally wounded for so long, they can't imagine attempting to make themselves vulnerable for any more hurt. So they close themselves off as a protection mechanism, not realizing that in doing so, they are opening up themselves for the voices in their head to get louder, to tell them they're not good enough, to focus more on the hurt. Listen to me when I say this. Whatever you focus on grows. So if you are then focused on all of the negative, you're going to get more negative interactions. And then that only reinforces the belief that other people mean to do you harm. But what I actually found is that most people, they believe they're good people. Most people want to be good people. Everyone who has done something bad has reasons to justify that behavior. So when you know that the vast majority of hurtful behavior comes from a place where someone has been hurt, you stop looking at them like they are a dangerous aggressor, and you start looking at them as the human being they really are, with all the faults that come along with being human. And do you know what the #1 topic discussed in my conversations with one person a week was? It was unresolved grief. Things that had hurt the person that they may not have had the space to talk about in an everyday discussion. We live in a world that moves so fast. We have vast access to huge amounts of information at our fingertips and technology that makes our lives more streamlined. But it is all of this technology that has allowed us to pull away from the communities that once used to keep us safe. People didn't just arbitrarily change from nurturing communities into monsters, but technology has helped to perpetuate the myth that people are dangerous, which has kept us in fear of one another. Years ago, there was a group of scientists that began asking people how many people they could call on if they ever had an emergency. And years ago, when they first began asking the question, the most common answer was 3 people. Today, the most common answer of how many people someone could call if they were in an emergency is 0. Today, the average person has no one to call if something were to go wrong. Think about living that way. I mean, is anybody else troubled by that? The pressure of just surviving alone in this world would be crushing. And are we really wondering why there is so much more anxiety in this world than there used to be? Or more depression? We have pulled ourselves away from our own humanity in a way that our psyches were not ready for. And because it has been happening like a slow leak over the course of many, many years, we have no idea why we are facing these challenges. So we blame it on things like genetics or brain chemistry, when sometimes that might be the case. Really, a lot of times, it's just us and how we interact together. So what does this have to do with leadership? Well, in order to practice leadership through human connection, you have to understand why human connection is so important in the first place. And I'll be the first one to admit that when I started my friend making project, I didn't know any of these things, but I was connecting with people so quickly and in such an open, honest way that after a while, I could feel something changing inside of me. 3 months into the project, the loneliness and depression I felt throughout most of my life was gone, and it's never come back. By 6 months into my project, I could feel myself changing inside, sort of like my soul was being knitted into a wholeness that I'd never known before. And by 9 months in, I began to want to share this newfound strength with others so that they could move forward in this way of life that had brought me a lot of peace. But I still didn't know what the thing was. I mean, I couldn't define it. I just knew it was there. And that's the story of how leading through human connection came to me. It's taken me almost 5 years to be able to step back and break it down into discernible parts of why that project was such a powerful influence in my life and how someone else might be able to copy the parts so that they too might be able to achieve the same type of powerful results. If you think about it, the whole thing was started with a definable purpose. Now, maybe the purpose is given to you, or maybe, like me, you came up with it on your own. It doesn't really matter where the purpose comes from. Just know that as soon as you set out on the journey, the first thing you're going to encounter is going to be self-doubt, just like I did, because no one begins the journey into leadership as a fully formed leader. You come to the table as imperfect, with lots of insecurities. That's part of the growth, and it's part of being human. I think it is important for people to know that when you have these feelings of not being good enough or not being the right person for the task, you should know that everyone feels that way in the beginning. I mean, how do you know you can accomplish something if you've never even done it before? It was like that when I was sitting in that leadership seminar when I was 15 years old. I just knew that I didn't feel like I belonged there. It never occurred to me that everyone else in the room probably felt the same way. Because that's what human beings do. We see our flaws so intimately that we automatically assume the worst in ourselves and the best in everyone else. But do you know how narrow a difference there is between most people and those on the path to leadership? The difference between them is as narrow as a sheet of paper. Sometimes it's only the width of a thought. The difference is that most people give up and leaders overcome their self-doubt and instead hold themselves accountable to the purpose. That's it. That's the only separation. You have to find the strength inside yourself and continue to move forward. No one is born with the superpower to lead. It is something that you have to nurture inside yourself like a garden. And it takes work. Leaders declare their intentions. They set measurable goals. And with the achievement of every small victory, a little more confidence comes with it. Not a feigned confidence or arrogance, but the ability to know that you can set goals and achieve them. I often hear people ask how they can bring more confidence into their life. And my answer is always the same. You have to set small goals and hold yourself accountable for doing the things you need to accomplish the task. There's no other way into confidence. You can't wish it into existence. You can't think it into existence. You have to take action. And when you look at the friend making project I did in 2018, even though it was largely done by accident, the project itself was well designed on the front end to increase my leadership skills. Part of what I felt on the back end of things in that project was the result of the things I just mentioned: defining the purpose, overcoming self-doubt, holding myself accountable, letting small victories build my confidence. But the other part of the victory was actually doing the work itself and continuing to make sure I was practicing the clear and direct objective of just talking to people I didn't know. There were things that I learned along the way, like how there's this one guy on Instagram that has a goal of talking to 10,000 people. Now, by the way, I think I just saw him cross the 5,000 mark not long ago, and he's got thousands of people that are following him on Instagram. And it would have been really easy for me to say midstream, well, maybe I should be more like Rob, because after all, look at all the attention he's getting for doing relatively the same thing that I was doing, but I didn't want to be like him. The goal when I started wasn't about getting more attention. It was about getting to know the people I sat down with on a very personal level. And part of the success of that project was that I kept to the original mission, the objective that was tied to my own personal sense of well-being, the purpose of me eliminating loneliness from my own life. And in order to eliminate loneliness, the truth is, you don't need to know 10,000 people's life stories, or 5,000, or really even 52. The truth is, if you're really looking to genuinely connect with people, you can't just sit down with someone one time. You have to hang out with them for a little while. And keeping up with that many people, it's a lot. Trust me, I know from experience. But sticking to that clear objective, that is a characteristic of leadership. If you're going to learn to lead a team of people, your team has to know what to expect from you. That means clearly defining their purpose on how they fit into your organization and taking it all the way down to the type of reaction they can expect from you when they have to give you bad news. A big part of the trust that has to develop between leader and team is knowing the parameters and what to expect. Erratic leaders may instill fear, but they will never truly rule the hearts and minds of the people they are supposed to be leading, because humans always drift towards predictability and away from chaos. And practicing clear and direct objectives, that's where the change stops being about you and starts to encompass the group. If everything else we just talked about is the key to growing the roots of leadership, this is where the plant starts to break through the soil. I genuinely wanted to get to know every single person I met. And I really feel like everyone that I sat down with could really feel that. That doesn't mean I didn't go into some of those meetups tired or stressed or not feeling my best. Yet I did my best to deliver what I told them I was going to deliver. And that was a conversation where I just got to know the other person. And that is what being a leader is about. It is about being the human being the other person needs, even when you don't feel like it. Because what you are actually doing when you set those clear, direct standards and follow them, you're actually building trust with your team. It's the last piece of the puzzle. There's so many books on leadership that are out there, and really nothing in leadership theory has changed in the last 100 years. But I believe one of the biggest and most underrated skills in leadership today is learning how to cultivate an atmosphere of empathy and trust. You see, our corporate managers of today, a lot of them just don't know how to develop empathy and trust in a corporate setting. Because as a human being, we have largely forgotten that in order to build the trust of the people surrounding you, you have to know who they are. You have to make them feel important because they are important. People seem to think that being a leader or a manager means that everything swirls around them as if they are the center of the universe. But in reality, the best leaders are servant leaders because they are the ones who continually reinforce trust with their team. And the easiest way for you to begin to build trust with a person is to take some time to sit down and really get to know them. This wasn't something that I knew when I first started the project. I only began to notice it after I'd been doing it for a while. I felt different inside, more connected. In looking to help others, I actually changed my life. Look, guys, even though we've been talking about leadership up to this point, we've really been looking at this experiment as a personal project. I never for one moment thought that this project would contribute to my work life in any way. Remember, this was something that I was committed to do on my own. It wasn't supposed to have anything to do with work. I mean, I didn't hide it. I was friends on social media with a lot of people I worked with. So they were actually tracking this personal journey of mine through social media. But I didn't promote it. When people asked me about it at work, I talked about the project like it was an extracurricular activity, no different than I might have talked about a TV show I'd watched the night before, or maybe a hike that I'd gone on. But somewhere in 2018, I started to find more success in my career. It wasn't something that came on all at once. It came on so gradually, I didn't even notice it was happening at first. I just thought that this was the natural progression of things. But the success just kept coming. You see, new customers became easier to find. Old customers became easier to work with in 2018. And I was still working on this huge personal project of mine where I was talking to one new person a week. And while I was doing that, I actually had the best year that I'd ever had professionally. I personally increased my company's bottom line by $250,000 that year. Everything that had been so hard in 2017, all of a sudden was super easy in 2018. And at that time, I just chalked it up to good luck. I was grateful for my good fortune, and I moved on to 2019. Now, I did stop sitting down with one new person a week because the project was over. But I found out really quickly that once you start this thing of meeting new people, it kind of becomes a habit. It was really, really difficult for me to turn off. New people still poured into my life in 2019, and my professional success continued on as well. And that year, I increased my company's bottom line by an additional $250,000 that year too. And then 2020 hit. Now, come on, you guys know how that all panned out, right? We were all locked away in our homes throughout much of the year. And I will admit, professionally, I don't think I fared quite as well. But while others were melting down with mental health issues, I wasn't even lonely. And I thought that was really weird because for most of my life, I've been plagued with these feelings of loneliness, inadequacy, and depression. I had gone to work and felt lonely. I've gone to parties and felt lonely. I've been surrounded by people and felt lonely. So you would think 2020 would have been the moment of my undoing. And yet I was fine living my life alone, confined to the four walls of my house. And that is the moment when I started to reevaluate where things had changed for me. Why wasn't I feeling the mental anguish everyone else was going through? And I traced it all the way back to the Human Connection project I did in 2018. that's when I stopped feeling lonely. Somehow, deep inside, I grew these big, gigantic, thick connection roots that grounded me to the earth. And when the winds of change came blowing so fiercely in 2020, those with shallower connection roots bellied up, and I was able to stand steadfast in my own mental health in a way that I've never done before. And in 2021, there were also some changes. I left my job and decided to start my own company. And in my very first year of business, I actually made $10,000 more than I had made the year before at my actual job. Now that's not supposed to happen. And this year, at the end of June, I actually billed out more in that 6 months than I did in all of 2021. And it isn't because I'm smart or because I'm talented. It's because in 2018, I learned how to harness the power of human connection. It turned me into a leader I never thought that I was before. And I am a completely different person because of it. And if I can change my life, there isn't any reason you can't do the same. Because when you learn to become a leader through the power of human connection, you don't just change yourself. You change the lives of everyone around you in your office and your community. Because guys, the loneliness epidemic is real. It lived inside of me for as far back as I can remember. But there is so much shame associated with being lonely that nobody's talking about it. Yet those studies say 1 out of 3 Americans are lonely and thinking that they are somehow deficient in something that makes other people well-liked or loved, when that just isn't the case. Those people aren't alone in their loneliness, but they feel that way. They feel as if they are locked inside a dark, lonely cell that they can't break free from. They might not even know what that thing that they're feeling is. They just know it's there, weighing them down. Do you know what it would mean to a person like that for someone to say, hey, I kind of think you're interesting. Could I buy you a cup of coffee sometime? I'd really just like to take some time to get to know you. Do you have any idea how spending a few moments with someone would make them feel special and change their life? Or how it might even change yours? And look, if you do something like this, don't think that people won't be, well, people, imperfect human beings. They may sometimes stand you up. Sometimes they make you feel unimportant. Maybe sometimes you just don't connect. That doesn't mean either one of you is a bad person. Sometimes connection just doesn't happen. Or maybe you have this great conversation with them once, but for no particular reason, you just don't seem to fall back in line with each other. I mean, that's okay. That stuff happens too. It happened to me when I was meeting one new person a week for a year. It might even be that for a while, everything seems great. And then suddenly you have like this wonderful new friend, and then life happens and they disappear out of your life and you're back to square one. Listen, this stuff happens all the time. It's normal. Or maybe you meet someone really great and you become lifelong friends. And suddenly you do have a person that you can call when you have an emergency. But that doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a number of years. And it happens when you don't even think about it. Long before my friend making project, all the way back in, I think it was 2007, I was a volunteer for an animal shelter here in Phoenix, and one of the volunteers in the admissions department made some waves about a controversial policy change that the shelter had made. And the shelter, not wanting any controversy, fired her as a volunteer. So I reached out to this woman that I didn't know very well, and I took her to lunch because I knew she was right and they were wrong, and I wanted her to know that. And we had such a good time at lunch that we agreed to do it again the next month. And then again the month after that. And after a while, we started having lunch every month. And we did that for 5 straight years. And when I went through a divorce, this lady who was a couple of years older than my mother, she was the only person in my life who actually helped me pack up all of my things in boxes and move out. And then around that same period of time, when I didn't have the money to fix my car, she let me borrow hers until I could get back on my feet. And then somewhere in the middle of all that, she came to me and she said she was putting together her will and was wondering if I would be the executor of her estate because she wasn't married, she didn't have any children, and I was the youngest friend she had. And without thinking about it too in depth, I said yes, maybe not really even knowing what that meant. And in June of 2018, I was right in the middle of my friend making project when she and I went out to lunch just as we always had. And she told me that her doctor had found cancer in her uterus. And she said she was going into surgery, but wasn't a big deal, that I shouldn't worry. And I told her that she was crazy if she thought I wasn't going to be sitting in that surgery waiting room. And at that time, we had been having lunch together once a month for a decade. And over the next 3 years, it really got tiring trying to explain the relationship between us to the people helping her in the medical profession. So she just started flippantly calling me her daughter. And I got tired of trying to explain the relationship between us to people I knew, so I started calling her my mom. And when I started my own business at the beginning of 2020, instead of lecturing me about how risky starting a business can be, she reached out and patted my hand and said, "If anyone can do this, it's you." And I could tell she was proud of me. And I don't know that anyone had ever been proud of me before. And when she died last October, my face was the last face she ever saw on this earth. We knew each other for almost 15 years, and somehow, so gradually, we didn't even realize it. Each of us became the closest person in the other's life. I really believe now that when we first met, we had both been walking around with holes in our hearts for a really long time. And somehow through our friendship, we healed that hurting part of the heart for the other. And that is what becoming a connection leader is all about. When you break it all the way down, leadership is really at its core just the art of human connection. It can change almost every aspect of your life in a positive way. It doesn't just teach you about others, it also teaches you about yourself, what you can do, what you can achieve. Your surroundings won't change, but the way you see the world will look dramatically different. Since the earliest 20th century, we have looked at this term leadership like it was a synonym for something special that only a few elite would ever achieve, when all of us have actually had this inside of ourselves all along. You don't have to be special. You just have to be human in your empathy. And you have to hold yourself accountable to the path, even when the doubt you have for yourself or your abilities is overwhelming. Leadership isn't something someone else gives you the title for. It's the title you give yourself, even when no one else sees it. You just have to have the courage to be who you are really meant to be, an empathetic person who takes the time to see what others do not. And that is truly what leadership is all about. Do we have any questions? I know Anna's around here someplace.
Yes, I am here. Yes, everybody, please enter your questions in. Erica, thank you so much. Actually, Alejandra is back here now, so I will let her take it over.
Hi, y'all. Life happens. I had to leave the office immediately, but I am back home to finish out the conference. So anyhow, thank you for your patience. And in looking at the questions box here, there's a lot of thank yous. Someone said that they're inspired, Erica. Let's see here. This has been such a powerful lesson. Erica has put what I feel every day into words that I haven't been able to express. So really great feedback. We don't have any comments or we don't have any questions coming in yet. So I'll just keep on reading off those comments that people are saying.
Well, if you would like, I actually have some common questions that sometimes people ask or they maybe like forgot to ask. Do you want to like just jump into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
So here's a question somebody has asked me, and so I'm just going to address it. Some people have asked, what about safety concerns? Because if you're going out and talking to people, I have actually had someone that has taken me aside and said, you need to stop doing this. This isn't safe. So part of being a connection leader is also setting healthy boundaries for yourself. So some of my healthy boundaries are, if I don't know the person, I never meet them in private or in my home. We always meet in public because I don't know them. I also don't allow anyone to move me to a secondary location where I don't have control to get out of it. During my friend making project, I did have someone that I met and we were having a great time. And he said, hey, let's go to this other restaurant. I really want to show you this thing. And I said, okay. And when we kind of moved into the parking lot, he said, why don't you just jump in my car and I'll just take you over there. And I said, sir, you are probably just fine. And, you know, this has nothing to do with you, but I am a woman. And so if we are going to go to another location, I'm going to be driving my car and you're going to be driving your car because I just met you. And as soon as I said it was a little uncomfortable to say, by the way, but as soon as I said it, he went, oh yes, of course, I wasn't really thinking of it that way. So in that way, you want to make sure that you're always safe and that you're not letting people cross boundaries that you don't feel comfortable with. You have to be your own advocate, and sometimes that's really difficult, but that is also part of being a connection leader.
All right, Erica, and we had a question come in. How do I turn myself outside in? Some tips would be greatly appreciated.
So I don't think I understand the question. Turn myself outside in.
Yeah, if you can, inside out.
Inside out. Okay. For some reason, I can't see all the questions, so I'm just relying on you, Alejandra.
You're all good.
So listen, I hear this from a lot of times. People are introverts, and they're like, this all sounds so stressful for me because they're so used to being able to take that time inside of themselves, and they need that. And that's okay, but you still need to be able to connect with other people. You have to understand your own boundaries and what's comfortable for you. Like maybe sitting down with someone you don't know is super difficult and overwhelming for you, but maybe if you could just like say hi to the people that are next to you. Maybe it's a simple hello and a smile. But if you purposely take the time to do it, I think what you'll find is if you start smiling at people and just saying hello, some of them will engage you in conversation. And if it feels comfortable, then allow yourself to be engaged in that conversation and take it off wherever it might go. And then you might find yourself bringing more people into your life. But sometimes you have to, if you don't have a lot of confidence, you have to have that small step on what can I do that's a little outside of my comfort zone to get me to the next level. And then once you get there, then you can take it a level higher. But you have to start somewhere. You can't just say, well, you know, I'm super shy, so this doesn't apply to me. It applies to everybody. Any other questions that we might have?
See here. Sorry, working off a tiny laptop. I got to expand a couple things here.
That's okay.
Okay. So someone is asking how can you share those boundaries with coworkers?
Listen, it's just being open and honest. I mean, at the end of the day. It doesn't have to be a heavy conversation. I always choose my words very carefully so that you're not going to necessarily hurt anyone's feelings, but it could just simply be something you saying, you know, I'm really not comfortable with that. And that's it. Sometimes that's all you have to say. But I think that you just have to be really open and honest with yourself on what you don't feel comfortable with. And if you don't feel comfortable, it's okay to say that. I think, I feel like women maybe do this a little more often than men, where we feel like maybe sometimes in certain situations that our feelings aren't valid. Your feelings are always valid. And if there's somebody that's doing something that makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to make it a big deal, but you can just say, you know, I'm really not comfortable doing that. And if they don't honor that at that point, well, then you can get a little more aggressive about it at that point in time. But if you just say, I don't feel comfortable, most people who are good people will just back off. And that's what you want them to do.
Thank you. So I don't see any other questions coming through, just some more kudos to you, Erica, on a great presentation from a lot of folks. If anybody else has other questions, please feel free to put those in. But in the meantime, reminder on those CEUs, there are a few requirements, one being attending this session and completing the evaluation. I just sent an email to everybody stating that we are having technical issues with folks getting access to the evaluation. So hang tight on the CEUs. We need to figure some stuff out, and I'll be reaching out to you, to all of you.
I will say this, just because I don't like to sit in silence. I will say this. Here's one of the other things that I've kind of learned that is not actually in that presentation. And it's also, when you change yourself from the inside, the world won't change around you, but you will feel like it has. And I have I knew that for a lot of years, but I will say this. There was an area of my life personally that I was single for a very long time. And I kept thinking, you know, I'm a nice girl. Why can't I find anybody that I like to date? And it was this whole big thing for me. And it wasn't because I wasn't trying. I just couldn't find those people to draw in my life that I thought were really great. And what I came to realize, there were people that I had surrounded myself with that didn't really necessarily have my best interest at heart. And as soon as I got rid of those people from my life, all of a sudden, I met somebody great. And it really went to show me how much the people in your life, if they are negative, you really need to get rid of them, because you don't even realize how much they are affecting your life negatively. Just if you feel like they just don't make you feel good, you probably need to find somebody different to hang around with. I don't know whether that makes sense. That's not scripted ahead of time, but just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Erica. All right, looks like we have a minute left without any questions. So let's go ahead and conclude this webinar. Thank you, Erica, once again for the presentation. Let's see. All right, Maria, I just saw your question come through. If you want to go ahead and email me that question, we will certainly try to find an answer for that. But everyone take care, and I hope to see you at the next session, the last session at 2:30. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.